writing algebraic expressions that are equivalent to these compositions of inverse and regular trig functions basically involve setting up a right triangle to figure out what this looks like. So they're really similar to some we've done in the past where there were weird fractions or weird numbers plugged into our inverse trig functions. Is that gonna, do I need? Okay, great. What was I saying? Okay, so these are going to be really similar to some we've done in the past where you were doing right triangle trig on some like inverse trig function that was a weird fraction or a number that we just didn't immediately know the angle to it. So that's going to be the process here. If we do tangent of sine inverse of 5x, the first thing we need to do is draw a picture where there's some angle that has a sine of 5x. Then we'll use that picture to take the tangent of it and get the answer to this expression. So let's draw our picture. So we have a triangle with an angle inside here, and that angle needs to have a sine value of 5x. That means the opposite side could be 5x, and I always like to just write it as 5x over 1 so that my hypotenuse can just be 1. It makes my life a little bit easier. Okay, so 5x over 1 fits into opposite and hypotenuse. If I'm doing tangent, I need opposite and adjacent. So I need this missing side, which we can use Pythagorean theorem to figure out what that is. So I have 5x squared plus, I'll call it a question mark, squared is equal to my hypotenuse squared, which is 1. Okay, so my question mark I'm trying to solve for. So this is 25x squared equals that question mark squared, no, plus the question mark squared equals 1. Solving for the question mark, I'm going to have question mark squared equals 1 minus 25x squared, which means that my hypotenuse is the square root of 1 minus 25x squared. I don't ever take my hypotenuse to be a negative. I take it if in the question of square rooting plus or minus, if it's a hypotenuse, it's always positive. So my hypotenuse is the square root of 1 minus 25x squared. So that means tangent, if I'm doing tangent of this lovely triangle, the angle inside here, opposite over adjacent, is going to be 5x over 1 minus 25, square root of 1 minus 25x squared. All right, we do basically the same process for our second one. One comment I'll make really quickly here. Notice that we're having a cosecant here. We haven't seen a cosecant or a secant or a cotangent in a while. That's because in our inverse trig functions, we don't do arc sine of, or arc cosecant, arc cotangent, arc secant. We just flip over whatever the arc sine, arc cosine, or arc tangent are. So we don't have separate functions for those. We just let them live as reciprocals of their partner function. But this one we are doing cosine inverse of this fraction, which means we'll draw another picture like this, and then we'll just find cosecant of that angle. All right, so if we want cosine inverse to be x over 2, that means for my angle inside here, the adjacent side is going to be x, the hypotenuse is going to be 2. You can, that's not even a little bit picture of a right triangle, but just act like it is. So for this one, you can also put x over 2 as just your adjacent side and your hypotenuse is 1. Usually if they give me a fraction, I'll let it look like it would be a fraction over here. So adjacent over hypotenuse means x over 2. So if I'm finding cosecant, if I'm finding cosecant, that's going to be the reciprocal of sine, which means I need the opposite and a hypotenuse. I'm going to do hypotenuse over opposite, so I need the opposite side. So we're going to do a Pythagorean theorem again, this time x squared plus, maybe I'll be good and label that an actual letter this time, plus y squared equals 2 squared, which is 4. So y squared is 4 minus x squared. So why are we taking the positive square root? Well, cosine inverse is going to live in the 0 to pi world. And what's happening in the 0 to pi world? All of our y values are positive, which means that this side of the triangle is going to be a positive number. So I don't want to take the negative. That would live down in quadrants 3 and 4, and cosine inverse lives above the x-axis. So this is going to be we're going to do hypotenuse over opposite for cosecant, so 2 over square root of 4 minus x squared.